It's that time of year again, if you can believe it. So, 2 years ago, I made a little video on a series I stumbled across called Catch Teenieping, and I was surprised with the response that it got. It became one of my more popular videos, which I think is likely because there aren't a whole lot of people talking about this series in depth. Last year, around this time, I released the follow up to that video looking at the second season of the show, both because I had heard it was better and because I had people asking me if I was going to look at more. Since then, I've had someone ask me at least once a month or so about the third season and when I was going to talk about that. So I just want to clarify how I'll be tackling looking at Teenieping in the future to cut down on those questions. For me, Teenieping is likely going to be a once a year series to look at. If I'm able to, I will look at and cover one season each fall on this channel. However, this is contingent on there being a new season for me to look at. I do not speak Korean, so in order to look at a new season, I'm going to need either reliable fan subtitles, which isn't something that seems to happen with this series, or an English dub of the season. So, as long as an English dub of a new season of Teenieping dropped, you can rest assured I will cover it that fall. No sooner, no later. You don't need to ask me about it, you just need to be a little patient. I've heard it loud and clear that there are plenty of you that want me to talk Teenieping. So, Season 3, or Secret Catch Teenieping, has completed in English now, and I have to say that it's about on par with Season 2. I hesitate to call it substantially better, but for the most part we have not had a backslide in quality. I wish we had a bit more of an upward trend in it, but there's only so much we can expect out of a show like this that has the primary goal of selling toys. This is your reminder now that I am not a fan of Teenieping. I am someone who has something of a morbid fascination with it. For me, this series is a subject of curiosity that I like poking at, rather than something that I am actually invested in. So, for those of you who might be fans of the series and will become legitimately upset if I am at all critical of it, this is the point where you should exit, and I am being serious about that. I don't go into Teenieping to intentionally trash it, and I do my best to give it credit when it does something well. Even if I am not a fan, I try to be fair in my criticisms. Despite that, each time I put out a Teenieping video is the time where I see the most backlash to what I have to say. I have to surmise that this is because Teenieping has a very young fan base, some of which haven't learned how to behave on the internet yet, or that just because someone has a different opinion than you on a children's show, that does not mean you should outright hate them over it. Like I said last time, I know that being online can sometimes just be like that, but the reactions I get for being critical of Teenieping have never really failed to baffle me. So, as usual, I am not out here to yuck anyone's yum, but to discuss my personal experience in view of the series. If you like Teenieping, then I am glad that you get more out of it than I do, but let's be civil about this, okay? Romi continues to be the main character, to no one's surprise, but I have to say I was a little disappointed in how she was handled this season. Now, I'm not expecting that she will have become an entirely different character or that she will really break from the formula that we've seen out of the series. That said, I find it very strange that at the start of the season, she is acting like everything in her life is peaches and cream and is just happy to have fun days with her friends. In case anyone needs a reminder, last season ended with her experiencing a major betrayal as her cousin, Jennie, used her to get access to an artifact, tore apart the view of the relationship she thought they shared, and essentially left her for dead with a dragon while going off to presumably do something nefarious. That was a really big turning point for the series, and the season even ended with Romi going to talk with the wizard cat that works for her family, presumably to start coming up with a plan on how to deal with everything that happened. It seemed like she was going to have some stuff that she was going to have to work through in relation to that. And having Jennie as our season-long villain was a setup that had the potential to really put Romi through it. Like, yes, this is a show that is clearly made for quite young children, so this is something that must be carefully handled. But that doesn't mean that you can't handle it. Kids are more resilient and insightful than you might think. I don't need Romi to be crying herself to sleep every night or anything like that, but I wish that this was something that would have been addressed sooner than it ended up being. Like, yes, it is funny that Romi says, "I really wish for peaceful days like this to continue," and then it hard cuts to a Teenieping basically being sucked into a black hole in the first episode.
I really wish for peaceful days like this to continue. Peaceful with nothing to worry about.
but that Romi is having a perfectly happy everyday life feels out of step to how the last season ended. I don't need her to be agonized every second, but it would have been nice to see her thinking about the situation before the point that magic comes crashing back into her life again, along with a new set of Teeniepings. Since it otherwise feels like in the time between, she just went happily about her daily life without any concern for the potential danger that Jennie poses. I think there was room to have Romi maturing and growing from this experience, but that's not really something the show seems interested in doing. And if that's what the show wants to do and they want to keep her more static, that's fine. They can make whatever choice they want in the writing. But I personally find it makes the whole thing seem a little more bland, since it doesn't really feel like the experiences that Romi is going through are affecting her in any way more than surface deep. It leaves the whole thing feeling pretty shallow. And yeah, that might have something to do with the way that the show is something of a big toy commercial at the end of the day, but when I get the sense that sometimes the writing wants to be more ambitious than that, can you really blame me for wanting to see that level of ambition pay off? Last season I said that Romi felt like she had her rougher edges sanded off, but I'm glad to say they've come back a little bit again this season. There are points where Romi is a little bit of a shit stirrer or can be a little bratty. She has a short temper at times. I like seeing her have those flaws, since it's a clear place where she is allowed to screw up and then make things right. There's even a few times where she is deliberately trying to get under another character's skin in that way that kids will sometimes do when they know that something bothers you. I like this since it makes her come off more realistically as a kid instead of just being some paragon. Even if I could have done without some of the moments where we have her jumping to wild conclusions again. However, the show doesn't always nail the balance in this depiction of Romi's flaws and growth from them. For example, let's look at episode 18, where the whole plot revolves around Huffyping. So the idea is that this Teenieping makes those she uses her magic on get huffy, as in they get in a huff, becoming bad-tempered and easy to set off, while also not conceding that they might have done anything wrong. If you've been around kids, you know that there are some that just kind of get like this when they don't get their way, so this is an episode that seems to be aiming to deal with that feeling as a demonstration for kids. The whole reason that this gets set off is that one of the main Teeniepings of the season, Okie Dokie Ping, is kind of getting overlooked when it comes to her wants and desires because she doesn't have a terribly strong backbone. Romi ends up promising her a special candy, but later on backs out of it by saying that she doesn't have what she promised and will get it to her later. The reality is that Romi does have it, but it's not in a perfectly appealing visual condition, so she doesn't want to give it to the Teenieping until she can get a more pristine looking one, but we won't find out about that until the end. This is then compounded by this Ping's friends all sort of just taking her stuff without asking her, leading her to head off and be upset in private. The Ping of the week uses her power on Okie Dokie, and she indeed gets in a huff about things and is a lot more vocal about how she is feeling, but in a way that isn't productive. At first it seems to help, since Romi is actually now made aware that Okie Dokie is quite upset, but because of her huff, the Ping won't say what it is that's actually wrong, and continues to just sort of expect Romi to figure it out and remember for herself, which isn't really getting us any closer to a resolution. It doesn't help that Romi is asking to be told what she did wrong so that she can apologize for it, rather than asking what she did wrong with the intent of taking action to make things right. Apologies aren't a magic fix-all. Seeing this go down, the Ping of the week decides that the best course of action is to also make Romi get in a huff, which certainly does not help the situation, since now both of them are utterly failing to communicate. This then ends up leading into the action segment of the episode, where Romi has to get her hands on the Ping that did this. It's only after the effects of the magic are undone that Romi and Okie Dokie are able to have an actual conversation where Romi owns up to what she has done wrong. This is a good tool for kids to be taught, and it's clear that the show is trying to have a kind of message or lesson of the week here. I don't think it's productive to try and ascribe all kids media as trying to teach lessons when that might not be their actual goal, but in a case like this where it is, I think it is worth looking into what the show is using their characters to teach and the way it demonstrates the growth of the characters. Which is why it is really disappointing to see the episode undercut this good moment between Romi and Okie Dokie at the very last minute. At the very end, Huffyping is like, sometimes being huffy is helpful, as though that is the moral of the episode, and no, this is just demonstrably untrue. While being in a huff can feel good at first, and did make initial superficial progress between the two of them, it quickly became something of a stone wall that was getting in the way of progress. It was only when both of them dropped that and had a genuine heart-to-heart conversation that the two of them were able to resolve the problem. Huffiness did not help at all. However, with Huffyping's comment being the note the episode ended on, even if it was meant to be an oblivious joke, that is the last thing we see and thus the thing that kids are most likely to take away from it. I think Romi is a perfectly fine character. I like her being realistically a kid by screwing up sometimes, but if the show is going to undercut the moments where she is actually doing better by contradicting them like this, I think it might all be for nothing. Just like the last season, all the friends we made along the way have been completely ditched aside from the continual heartsping, so that we can make a whole new set and collect them up like Pokemon. This time we have the key Teeniepings, who all have their own little gimmick and come from a place called Mystic Town. Don't worry about the whole key thing, it's more just a motif rather than something that actually plays into their characters, just like the Jewel Pings last season. I want to point out right off the bat that this season is once again going with a new set of Teeniepings being flung from their home at the start of the season, rather than following up with the idea that season 1 left hanging that more Teeniepings had been scattered than just the initial set that Romi had collected, and that eventually she was going to have to round all of those up too. At this point, I think we just kind of have to accept that's not going to come back around again, even if it annoys me a little. Having a new set of Teeniepings be scattered each season is just something that has a little bit more drama to it and allows the writers to craft a plotline that has more timed stakes to it, rather than this just being a leisurely stroll to collect up all the Teeniepings. While I think it might have been better for them to leave off that implication that they set out at the end of the first season, I can understand the choices that were made for the sake of trying to elevate the seasonal storyline. Another interesting thing to note is that the Teeniepings all wear clothing now, instead of just walking around with maybe an accessory or two on. I don't mind this as a design choice since it gives more room for them to look a little more interesting, but it does mean that when the second season Teeniepings come back and aren't wearing any clothes, it does seem a bit out of place. It's also funny that when Heartsping, the pink one that carries over from season to season as Romi's partner, seems to get transformed from a Jewel Ping into a Key Ping in order to work with the new transformation item, she magically gains clothes out of nowhere, leading me to start to wonder if the clothing is somehow biologically relevant. But let's not dwell on that too much, lest we get into the realm of Sylveon flesh ribbons and instead actually look at the characters that were given this season. Heartsping is still around, like I said, and seems to be just settled into the rhythm of being the sweet and kind one and little else. She rarely does anything interesting outside of the moments where the series might highlight her in some way as being Romi's companion. The most interesting thing related to her is that before Romi skips out on a magic class in a flashback scene, there is a moment where there is an offhanded mention of something that sounds like it was called a soul Teenieping, but it was kind of hard to tell around the cat wizard's thick character voice, if I'm being honest. This seems to be what Romi and Heartsping and Jennie and Onlyping are meant to be as pairs. Like, sometimes there's just a connection and a Teenieping ends up being tied to a person. I presume this is to explain why Hearts doesn't rotate out every season and stays with Romi, and likely has something to do with that prequel movie they ended up making about Romi and Hearts meeting each other. However, that bit of world building was the most interesting thing to come out of this Teenieping this season, and she was mostly just kind of there and functional. We've already talked about Okidoki Ping when looking at that episode conflict between her and Romi, but she is again one of the main pings of the season that allows a transformation. She also falls into the realm of just being kind of nice and soft-spoken, kind of like Joa Ping last season, but without the arc of being unable to transform that made Joa stand out. Without some standout element like that, Okidoki is just kind of there and nice to have around, but not really anything all that special. I've found with there being so many of these little guys, it feels like they run out of steam a little on crafting unique personalities for them sometimes, but I wish that wasn't the case for the ones that are season-long companions. I am perfectly fine with the ones that are essentially one-off episodic characters being reduced to gimmicks, since that's about all they're meant to be, but it would help a lot if the core pings of each season had some more substance to them. I don't think it's great that even immediately after finishing the season, all I can think to say about Okidoki is that she's nice, sweet, and soft-spoken. I feel like I should know her better than that and should have more of an opinion on her than I do on the side character Dr. Teenieping. In contrast to this, you have another one of the core pings of the season, Nana Ping. The whole idea behind her is passion, and I think that really fits into the vibe she has going on. She's a character that is quick to leap into action and likely has the most confidence that we've seen out of the core set. She's bright and energetic. I don't think she's a particularly deep character or anything like that, but I do have a sense of her personality, and she does have a few standout focal moments. Though I do think there was room to do that focus just a little bit better to give us more of a sense for her as a unique character. For example, there's an episode where Nana gets sick with a Teenieping illness that comes about due to overexertion, which feels like a place where there's room to give her characterization related to that. As the character who is tied to the concept of passion, maybe she overworked herself by working too hard on a project that she was passionate about, even though everyone was telling her to take a break. Nah, she was just running around a lot due to Teenieping shenanigans, and that's why she got sick. In fact, the character that shows the most passion in the episode is the Dr. Teenieping that works tirelessly for a week to take care of Nana after she made things worse by trying to avoid being treated. So while this was technically an episode that focused in on Nana, it delivered more character about one of the side Teeniepings than her. The last core one this season is Trueping, and you'll never guess what he's the Teenieping of. Yeah, that's right, it's honesty. Trooping is an attempt to go for that kind of grumpy, cute thing, but they don't commit to that all the time, which I think was the right choice, since that keeps the gimmick from getting old and thus annoying. I also appreciate that they didn't go for the route of making a character that is brutally honest while having a flat affect, since that would run the risk of getting under people's skin too. Unfortunately, he doesn't get a whole lot of focus for us to really get to know him beyond the basics though, so there isn't really a lot to talk about when it comes to him. For me, he ends up being a more endearing execution of a character like Dada Ping, my least favorite of the original season. I will say it was really annoying though that the one episode that actually does have a bit of focus on True was the one where everyone didn't believe him when he said he didn't do something. Yes, the guy was annoyed that they had to go camping instead of going to the beach, but that's no reason to jump to the conclusion that he is sabotaging the trip. That's not even getting into the fact that they are accusing him of putting out the fire in a grill when he's, 5 inches tall? Yeah, sure, it was definitely him who did that. Oh yeah, and he's literally the honesty guy. You're gonna tell me he's lying?
Sure, Jan.
The other Teeniepings of the season are mostly just there to be gimmicks and not much else, and there's not anything wrong with that, to be clear. They're sort of meant to be one-off characters, and it is perfectly fine if they are just doing that and serving that function as we would expect them to. They're about as much characters as a Pokemon who shows up on the side in a single episode of the anime. I don't expect them to be anything more than we might think they would be at a first glance. What I do like about this set, though, is that the addition of clothing and the general way that the art direction of the series is evolving as it goes on has made this the most visually appealing group of Teeniepings, with a lot of variety in shape and costuming that allows them to feel more distinct than they did in the last 2 seasons. While there remain still variations on the same base plushy body, there's enough variation happening now, and that base is covered up enough that they feel more like they have their own thing going on. In the past, there were very few that had some kind of clothing element, so the variation was basically all focused on the head and perhaps a handheld, leaving the bodies very samey blank canvases for all of them. But now a lot can be shown to us visually by the way they choose to dress and style themselves, giving more of a personality at a glance than we've had in the past. Which is why I think you can see some fans of the series getting really attached to some of these one-off side characters, even if they don't actually have a lot of screen time. It also means that this season we're seeing the start of more Teeniepings that are related to specific careers. Like we have a doctor and a firefighter Teenieping, and that doctor even has a set of nurses to go along with her. Oh, and look at that, both of those Teeniepings are girls, breaking away from those jobs being stereotypically associated with men. Nice. The trade-off is that we also get treated to Justice Ping, meaning that there is officially a cop-flavored Teenieping. Now, I'm not going to get into the politics of policing in a goddamn Teenieping video of all things, but let me just point out that it is interesting that this series, in their depiction of a cop character like this, presents him as being hair-trigger and jumping to conclusions based on no evidence, while also being completely convinced of his own righteousness. Interesting. To be fair, this is completely with me looking at it through an American lens. The politics around police behavior are not the same in South Korea, where Teenieping is made, as they are here. I'm not going to push my national experience with policing onto a different country that handles these things differently. I just found it interesting that the way you experience this character and the choices made in their presentation are going to vary wildly depending on where you are from. The last Teenieping I want to talk about is Lucky Ping, who is in a newly introduced class of them this season. She is a legendary Teenieping, which isn't really defined, but from context we can pick up that she's sort of meant to be a protector of sorts to this set of Teeniepings, watching over their town and all that. I expect that we will end up seeing more of these in the future, like one per each season as part of the finale plotline and things like that. Right off the bat, though, I want to say I absolutely adore her design. She is really cute, and her look gives the impression of her being a magical girl in her own right, which really sells the sense of her having some level of power more than the other Pings. However, we don't get to see her design or even learn her name for a long time, because she spends most of the season like this. Yeah, Lucky Ping spends most of the season locked in a box and is mostly just referred to as Box by everyone as a result. She does a few mysterious things throughout the season, but it isn't until near the end that she gets fully revealed and is able to take part in everything. That's not to say she doesn't have a character before that point, though, since she is one of the most character-filled of all the Pings before that point, even when all we are able to see is a box that wiggles around a little bit now and then. At the start of the season, it's immediately made clear that she is confident to the point of arrogance, but at the same time, because of her situation, she is completely at the whims of those who she sees herself as being above, leading to some amusing contrast. For example, in the very first episode, she talks down to Romi and the other core Pings of the season, only to immediately have to roll this back and start apologizing when Romi starts to leave without her.
Are you leaving me alone here? How can you do that? That's not a noble thing to do!
No, sorry, we're in a hurry.
Huh? No, wait up! I'm sorry. If you're so kind to take me, I'll pay you back someday. I beg you. Please, don't leave me here.
It gives her a big sense of personality that is in contrast with how the Teeniepings are usually portrayed. However, that's not to say that she is perfectly handled. When she's let out of the box at the end of the season, she is powerful but also benevolent and not at all like she is at the start of the season. And sure, I think you could make the argument that being inside the box so long was a humbling experience, but that's not something that's really shown to be a journey of growth that she goes on over the course of the show. There are plenty of times where she interacts with the group from inside the box, and plenty of sites where we could have seen her grow and mature into being kinder and more helpful, but that's not really what happens. After a certain point, she just kind of chills out and stops acting that way without much reasoning behind it. If it is meant to be that she came to care about these characters and that made her want to be better, that's fine, but I think that needs to be something that's a bit more at the forefront and more clearly portrayed. If that was the intent, it comes off kind of like that happened off screen. Still, she was my favorite of the set this time around. Gotta show a little love to my fellow purple-haired girlie. Much of the sidecast is playing a reduced role this season, to the point where it can sometimes feel a little generous to call them sidecast with how little they show up. For example, despite Romi still living and working at the bakery, Sarah and most of the bakery boys really only show up in passing outside of maybe 1 or 2 episodes. It feels like there is room where these characters could be used, but the series isn't interested in doing that, so they kind of fade so much into the background that they become a part of it. The bully girl in Romi's class also doesn't show up nearly as much as she did last season, likely because Romi is spending far less time at school this season in general. I mean, I get it. There's only so many interesting stories that you can tell in a school, and being outside of it gives them more flexibility in the stories that you're able to tell. But that does mean there's a whole set of established characters that we don't really run into because they are mostly dependent on the context of being Romi's classmates. Some of them do show up, but they're usually in passing as convenient victims of Teenieping magic and little else. And I mean convenient victims. They'll show up in a separated scene to establish the magic of a Teenieping in that episode, and that's it. We won't see Romi interact with them. I think this lack of side characters really once again stems from the fact that this is a series that runs with half-length episodes where they are already trying to work in a lot with Romi and the Teeniepings, so everything else kind of falls to the wayside. And that does mean that outside of Romi and perhaps 1 or 2 other characters, the human cast of the series feels just as thin as the Teeniepings. However, Romi's 2 friends, Maya and Mary Lou, were around a little bit more this season to make up for that, playing supporting roles in various different stories now that they are privy to the whole magical side of Romi's life. It's not a lot, admittedly, but it's enough that I actually feel like they're part of Romi's life, compared to last season where it could feel a little bit like the series was forgetting about them. There was even a whole episode that focused on Maya's relationship with her father, though I want to talk about that for a second because I think it ends on a bit of an odd note. So the episode mostly deals with the fact that Maya doesn't like having her picture taken because she really only has pictures of herself with her mom and not her dad, because he works a lot as an animator and has thus missed a lot. Over the course of the episode, though, she comes to terms with the way that her father is supporting her, and he does his best to be there even if his work gets in the way sometimes. We are even shown that he often does make it to her events, but is late. And this is a sweet episode, kind of dealing with the way that parents just aren't always as available as kids would like them to be, but it also felt a little off. I know it's not the intent, but at the end I was left sitting there like, is this episode telling kids to be okay with their parents being overworked? And like, I get that it's not really doing that, but at the same time, you know, it gave off that vibe a little bit. And maybe I just feel that way because her father is an animator, and this would be a really funny way for the show to do a cry for help from them. The one side character that really has something going on is Jennie, Romi's younger cousin that betrayed her at the end of the prior season. She's serving as the main antagonist this whole season since she's the one that sent all the key pings out of their town. At first, it really is unclear why she has done this. It isn't until pretty decently into the season that we are shown it is because she wants to use a special magic master key on the boxes that the town is made up from to open them all in search of something. Yeah, the season leaves a lot of the main actual plot of the story until the end of the show to be wrapped up in the finale, which kind of sucks some of the tension out of proceedings. Like, I know Jennie is up to something, but without knowing what she's trying to do and the way she doesn't show up all that much or even interact with Romi directly, it keeps me from feeling like she's actually a threat. And like, if the series wants to be more laid back and cozy, well, that might not be to my personal taste. That is fine. I just, once again, take issue with the way it felt like the series wanted to be something bigger and then ended up not going through with it. So Jennie is mostly in the background of things. She does nudge the rogue key Teeniepings in the direction of Romi in order to cause her problems, but this feels opportunistic rather than planned, especially since it turns out that Romi having all the key pings summons the magic key that Jennie has been using to her, something that only hinders Jennie rather than helping her. Due to writer clairvoyance, this doesn't actually get in her way because she uses the key right before it goes floating off to Romi, though. Now, it can be argued that maybe Jennie didn't know this, but that's never actually something the show confirms or denies, and as a result, it ends up feeling the slightest bit off. Not enough to be a real problem, but enough that I noticed it. Then again, this is a show with a very young audience, and I have a big adult brain, so, you know. Jennie does eventually find what she is looking for, and what it turns out to be is an evil transformation item that looks just like Romi's, but in dark colors, which is a little odd since Romi's was specifically made by the Cat Wizard, and the one that Jennie finds seems to just exist in an evil box under the ground. So I'm having a little trouble telling if the transformation items are meant to be sort of magical artifacts or if they're crafted objects. The show is sending cobbled signals about that part of the lore. Once Jennie gets this, though, she does have one of the best transformation sequences the show has ever had to become Princess Labyrinth, through which she has enough power to steal Romi's transformation item and the magic key back from her, as well as most of the key Teeniepings in all one fell swoop. She then starts using all of them in order to open a magic portal door thing through which she expects she will be able to reach her parents, which has really been her goal this whole time. At the end of the day, Jennie is just a young kid whose parents are missing and who wants them back desperately. It is as plain as that. For all that she is yelling at Romi and acting like Romi is the problem, she's just a kid who's placing the blame in the wrong place because she doesn't really have anyone to blame since she doesn't know what happened to them. The problem is that this is kind of undercut by the way that Jennie is presented in the series. Her character design is fairly mature, and I don't mean like it's sexual or anything, it's just that she isn't really styled like a kid. Her clothes and hairstyling seem like they're for someone older and more mature than she's meant to be. She seems like she's the older cousin rather than the younger, unless you're looking at the way that she's shorter than Romi. This isn't helped by her vocal performances in both Korean and English sounding like they're closer to a grown woman than a child. If you view Jennie as being older than she is, you're a lot less likely to give her the grace you would a stupid kid. I think the writing in regards to the whole situation is also a little bit of an ass pull too. It becomes clear that Jennie does just think that her parents are missing rather than being dead, which they are actually verbally confirmed to be this season. I thought that that was what last season was trying to imply without directly saying because it's a kid's show, but it's sort of treated like a bit of a revelation here, so I think we were supposed to think that they were just missing. And this does make me think less of all the adults in Romi's family because Jennie is 12, not 3. They should be honest with her about the status of her parents instead of lying to her like that. That's the thing I think she does have a right to be upset by. However, it's explained that Jennie's parents died because Jennie was very ill and they left to find a cure. Then once they had it, they had to use all their power to send it back to save her, and I guess died as a result of that. It's kept kind of vague and flimsy, which doesn't help and kind of raises just as many questions as it answers. It's explained that Jennie doesn't know this because she was so sick that she lost her memory. Now, do I expect that the series was going to have a deep look at Jennie's pain and some guilt she might feel about potentially being the cause of her parents dying? No, it's still a show for kids at the end of the day, and while I do think kids can generally handle more than we are willing to throw at them in media these days, that is something that feels a bit heavy for this show. At the same time, though, I do think the whole story around this is kind of flimsy and feels a little made up on the spot rather than planned out. I don't remain entirely convinced that this was the plan the whole time when Jennie was created. Does it lead to a pretty dang good season finale conflict? Oh yeah, this is the best actual fight that the series has had, even if a bit slow. However, the pretense of Jennie conveniently forgetting that she was ever sick and everything surrounding that feels so flimsy that you can see the writers pulling the strings, so it doesn't emotionally hit the way I think they wanted it to. The moment that does emotionally hit, and the moment I think shows the biggest internal conflict for Romi in the whole season, is the moment where Romi uses magic to constrain Jennie to keep her from running through the portal, apologizes despite Jennie saying that she hates Romi, then closes the portal, seemingly cutting Jennie off from ever being able to see her parents again. It's an obviously hard moment for the both of them, and the animation does end up selling it pretty damn well. Jennie doesn't take this well, and ends up doing one last gambit that she says is something about Romi showing her sincere heart or something like that, which doesn't feel quite right. Seems like a touch of final revenge would suit her mindset more, but we just kind of have to roll with it. Romi passes the test, gets Jennie out of being merged with the town, and everything is finally over. Romi then uses both the good and evil transformation items as well as the magic book from last season to give Jennie exactly 1 minute to see her dead parents and get closure in private for them. And yes, the scene actually does last for exactly 1 minute. Let me say, I do not have a problem with Romi being able to pull this power out of nowhere. It's convenient, yeah, but it gives a character we're meant to care about emotional closure, and I am never actually going to get mad about magical girls gaining new powers or techniques unless it contradicts something that was already established. Go ahead and waken up your new power, Queen.
The love we cherish until the very end has wakened up this new power.
No, the problem I have with this is that this 1 minute meeting with her parents seems to just completely fix all of Jennie's problems in one fell swoop. She's immediately sad and apologetic for everything that has happened after, which, while to be expected for a show like this, also does feel like too much of a flip to be natural. It's hard to believe the turnaround when less than 10 minutes ago she was screaming at Romi about how she hates her. It's a little much to get on board with, especially when it seems like this is the end of her arc, and likely the end of her extended relevance in the show. I expect she'll pop up for a cameo now and then not much else. Jennie also does not really face any consequences for anything she's done, the danger she put people in Teeniepings in, the pain she caused the key Teeniepings, or her actions last season that could have looked like an attempted coup in the right light. Like, I get it, I don't expect there would be jail time for a child, but it does seem like there isn't going to be anything where she actually has to reflect on her actions, and she is just a kid, that makes sense, but I would have liked if there was something small about her either being lightly grounded or not being allowed to use magic for a bit, just to make it clear she's not getting off completely scot-free. This whole thing honestly makes me think a lot less of the adults around these girls with how they've reacted to this situation. They treat it like a little spat and straight up tell the girls that they just assumed the both of them would work things out, which does not feel in keeping with the proportion of the actions Jennie seemed to be taking. Yes, she wasn't trying to take over the world or something, but this was ultimately something that caused a lot of collateral harm that Romi was forced to clean up. This also makes it look really unfair when Only Ping, Jennie's companion and partner, is made to do work for the cat wizard in penance, giving her a harsher punishment than the one who actually orchestrated everything. Sure, we see hearts break only out of work to go and make up with the other Teeniepings, but it seems like that punishment is going to be waiting for her when she gets back. I like Jennie's journey, but the details could have used some cleaning up is all. I doubt the next season is going to give us something like this emotional drama, and that's fine. I think the series could probably use something a little on the lighter side, but I do think the season as a whole will perhaps be a little weaker for it. So I've always had the opinion that the magical action of Teenieping is one of its weakest elements overall. It usually just boils down to chases that end up feeling repetitive and don't do very much to make the show feel very exciting. However, the two-part opener to the season did give me some hope that things were going to be more interesting and actually bring up that side of the series. In some ways it did, and others it really didn't. One of the first things we are told upon Romi getting her new transformation item, because the last one was destroyed at the end of last season, is that the item will choose the Teenieping transformation that is best for the situation, but that Romi can override this and choose for herself if she wishes. This made me think that maybe this time the princesses would be significantly different from each other in some way, and choosing which one to use might actually have some reasoning and utility behind it. No such luck. The princesses are all practically identical aside from minor flavor changes in their magic once in a blue moon. It's not even with every magic they do. There doesn't seem to be some reason to choose one over the others, and if Romi is making the choice to override things, that is not an element that's ever actually shown to us. She seems to just let the item pick every single time, so I don't know why that line was thrown in there. At the very least, I do at least see a reason for her to transform. The start of the season and then one episode in the middle do finally establish that she is gaining higher physical capabilities in her transformed form, being a little bit faster and stronger in ways that would be helpful. This was never something that the prior season showed us, so it's good to see that the transformation is for more than just disguise. Because the show certainly is not trying to pretend that Romi has to hide magic or Teeniepings from anyone anymore, Teeniepings are regularly interacting with humans even if they don't know what they are, and there doesn't seem to be any attempt to keep them secret from anyone in town anymore. Like, one of the early episodes of the season literally has Heartsping swiping credit cards for customers at a restaurant. So while the whole transformation variation is a complete bust, the one thing that is better is the actual catching mechanics of the season. The key Teeniepings have the ability to hide themselves as or in objects, so if they can distract or disable Romi long enough, they can get themselves hidden away and make it hard for her to do anything about that. Her transformation item is able to scan for them, but it can't pinpoint them, only narrow it down to 3 possible options of where they're hidden. Romi then has to use either context clues or investigate to figure out where exactly they're hidden before shooting the right object with a magic bow and arrow in order to reveal the Teenieping and catch them. This is nice because it adds something of an interactive element for the kids to play along with in the show. They are not given the tools to guess for themselves every time, but sometimes they are, and even if they're not, you can still try and make a guess just to see if you're right. The show does not fall back on this every single episode. While it is used in most episodes where we are catching a Teenieping, it's not used in every one, and there is some variety in how it's used. For example, there is an episode where it's so obvious that we don't even have to bother guessing, or an episode where we need to take a closer look in order to know for sure. The show keeps it just varied enough that it feels fun each time. The downside is the inconsistency in how getting things wrong is handled. This only happens twice. The first time, literally nothing happens, and Romi is able to just take a second shot for free with no consequences. The second time that happens causes a Hydra situation where the object she shots doubles and it gets harder to figure out which one is right. The second time is a more interesting case, but she gets it right in the very next shot, so we don't need to see this escalate at all, which is disappointing in a place where you can see the show butting up against the limited runtime of those half-length episodes like it's always had trouble with. The first instance where nothing goes wrong also just feels like the show doesn't have any stakes to it and opens up the question of why Romi doesn't just shoot all 3 at a random order each time, since apparently nothing will go wrong if she gets it wrong. The show is also just still running into that issue where it doesn't manage to make the chase sequences terribly exciting when they happen. There was one chase scene that I thought was well done, but outside of that, there weren't any that did anything to wow me more, even if it's clear the show staff are getting more and more comfortable with animating the series as it gets smoother with each season, and this season in particular has seen a jump in the detail of the various settings that we've gotten used to. Seriously, the bakery looks so much less empty than it did before. And of course, I want to talk about the things that made this show weird and thus keep me fascinated even if I'm not actually a fan of it. Let's start with the dub. So once again, I watched this dubbed, which some of you might not agree with, and I understand that. However, as a show with a small fan base, this isn't something that is getting independent secondary translations by fan efforts as far as I've been able to find. In most cases, the English-speaking fan base does need to wait for the English dub to drop in order to get their subtitles, and when they do, they're not actually subtitles. What instead happens is we are given what are colloquially known as dub titles, which is a subtitle track that goes with the dub and is accurate to the dubbing audio. If the dub makes a change in any way, that is reflected in these subtitles. This is not me trying to say that they are potentially completely inaccurate to the original Korean translation. Translation isn't a one-to-one art in the first place. But subtitles that are translating the original can differ from the dub. When dubbing, sentences are sometimes adjusted a bit in order to match the timing of the mouth movements in the show. You can't have something that takes too long to say, or the character will still be talking when their mouth has stopped moving. See how that's weird? The same information is likely coming across, but the exact wording or where exactly it is placed in a sentence might be different. It's not a bad thing. but because the subtitles are tied more to the dub, I am going to be getting the same writing whether I watch it in English or Korean. So I use the English dub both because I have found it amusing in the past and because it makes it easier for me to take notes while watching. Additionally, the English dub is also what children on my side of the world are likely encountering when they watch the show, so I want to know what experience is provided to them. I've never found the English dub to be particularly good, but the only real obvious mistakes that I can pinpoint as someone who doesn't speak Korean is getting the genders of some of the Teeniepings wrong. It's pretty easy to tell. In Teenieping land, girls have heart noses and eyelashes, and boys have round noses. What fascinates me is the way that the quality of the dub bounces around between seasons. Season 1 was definitely the worst of it, and Season 2 was an improvement because it was hard not to be, but I do feel like Season 3 is a bit of a step back in some regards. It's not completely terrible, but it didn't continue that trend of improvement, unfortunately. I struggled to find much information about the dub that I could actually back up with a source, and I'm not looking to spread misinformation, but to me at least, it does seem like we're still in that realm where English isn't necessarily the first language of some of the dubcast, leading to some odd moments here and there, or the dialogue not flowing terribly naturally. But hey, the Netflix edition actually got vocals on the theme song this time instead of remaining instrumental. That's something. It's just a shame those vocals are not terribly strong and don't give the greatest impression of the series right off the bat.
Hello there, mysterious secret Teenieping.
However, the thing I wanted to point out about the dub this time is that there is a moment in the first episode that really made me sit up and go, whoa, 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 out loud. Shortly after our 3 royal Teeniepings for the season show up, the box containing Lucky Ping falls from the sky as well. So we've already gone over this character and the way she can be a little abrasive and the way she interacts with everyone at first, but there's one part of that that I didn't actually mention before, and that's the dubbing choice that was made for her. So when we first meet her, we get this line.
You pricks! Let me out of this right now!
Wait, what was that?
You pricks!
One more time? Yeah, Lucky Ping, out of nowhere, just calls everyone that's gathered there pricks, which is really sending up red flags for me since this is a kids show and that is definitely something that most adults are not going to want their kids calling someone. There might be some regional debate on this, but in the area I'm from, this is just another way of calling someone a dick and is at the very lightest at least borderline swearing and definitely not language kids should be using. I double checked and the Netflix version doesn't actually do this. She says you guys rather than you pricks. She only says pricks on YouTube, which is the more easily accessible place to watch this given that it's free. So there are 2 versions of this dub that are slightly different and one of them is definitely less kid-friendly for some odd reason. That's the most standout instance of the dub for the series continuing to be buck wild, but there are 2 more in the episode related to Arya Ping that I'd like to point out because they made me giggle. Firstly, they keep calling a crow a crow instead, which just feels so deeply wrong to me that I have to subject you to it too.
A bird after a shiny object. It's definitely the crow. True.
I think maybe that crowd could have the last note. Okie dokie.
The other thing is that they just cannot be consistent on Arya Ping's name. Sometimes it's Arya and sometimes it's Aria. Just take a look.
Arya Ping, the singer. This musical note belongs to Arya Ping.
Arya Ping.
That's Arya Ping's musical note that makes you sing all the time, true? Arya Ping is pulling a prank.
Arya Ping.
We didn't see Arya Ping, too.
There's no sight of Arya Ping.
That is Arya Ping. She likes to sing.
Relax, Arya Ping. I'm really glad, Arya Ping. Teenieping. Arya Ping catch.
My name isn't Arya Ping as you think. It's Ping.
I also want to point out that this season has once again just been absolutely packed to the gills with what is obviously meant to be toy advertisement. Like, yeah, that's a given for a show like this that is going to try and make money off of toys as part of their marketing. This isn't the first show to do this, and it certainly won't be the last by any means. That said, it's getting so blatant that it grates on me. Every season we have a new big dollhouse set up for the Teeniepings to live in, but this season we also had a big hospital playset and a big amusement park playset, all of which look like plastic toys, and oh, look how much fun the Teeniepings are having. You want your Teenieping toys to be happy like this too, right? Right? It's devious, and I don't like the vibe of it. It's milking it, especially when we have a whole episode that is about how much fun the amusement park playset is, which includes shrinking Romi and her friends into bobble-headed abominations too. I also find it interesting this season needed to have its pokey rap style song that lists the names and features of all the Teeniepings. This time around it is far less catchy, and the reason for it makes even less sense. At least last time it was during a graduation of all the Teeniepings. Here they're just doing a fashion show, which doesn't really need this sort of roll call, even if it's supposed to be their big goodbye to Romi before they go back home again. And not directly related to this season, but I do want to talk about Teenieping's YouTube shorts, since I've gotten some of those lately as a result of engaging with Teenieping on YouTube. Now, most of these are just reposts of clips from the show, but some of them are things like collaborations that they're doing and the like. Now, let me preface this by saying I'm not into K-pop in general. The closest I get is watching K-pop Demon Hunters, which is really more for being a good animated musical rather than being about K-pop in specific. So I don't know a lot about K-pop culture or anything like that beyond what I've picked up from some YouTube videos about drama in that community. So, speaking as an outsider like that, it feels very strange to me to see Teenieping collaborating with K-pop groups, or at the very least interacting with them in the way that it does. The video in specific that really stood out to me is this one. So it is a Teeniepingified version of the group, I believe it's pronounced aespa, but correct me if I'm wrong. And it's an animation of the choreography from and set to the song Dirty Work. Alright, this isn't a sexual song, not outright anyway, but looking at this and then watching both the music video and live performances, I don't think it's out of line for me to say that even if this song isn't sexual, it is still sensual. There's low vocal fry, rolling bodies, lidded eyes, posing and movements that emphasize the body for the pleasure of the eye. We're not simulating acts or stripping, but we're still putting out a vibe, you know? And it feels really weird for me that a children's show is recreating that in their art style with versions of their characters styled like members of this group. I'm not saying they can't do it, but I am saying it feels weird for a Teenieping to be giving me bedroom eyes. Look, like I said, this isn't outright sexual or anything like that, but if they're gonna do this, then I'm gonna point out that I find it a little weird. Teenieping is a series that I like to think will improve over time, but while Season 2 was an improvement over Season 1, Season 3 feels like we are starting to plateau a little. It's better than going down, but I'd like to see them do more than just stay the course. The show isn't something that I personally would choose to set a child down in front of when there are other options, but I know there are kids out there who are really into it, so I want them to have something of quality that they can enjoy. I want to see the magical adventure side of this magical adventure be something more engaging. I want the characters to feel well realized and interesting. I want to have a reason to care about the damn Teeniepings and get attached to them, despite knowing that they're never going to show up outside of the season they first show up in, unless they're one of the main ones, in which case they will get a cameo next season at best. I don't think I'll ever be a fan of this show. I'm not into mascot shenanigans, and there is far too much of that in this series for me to ever grant it the status of one of my favorites. But I do genuinely want to see it improve, and I worry that what we will see will be incremental. Well, that's another season of Teenieping down as my Halloween treat to all of you. I guess I'll see you next October for the dessert-themed season. Until then, you can follow me here to see me talk about other Magical Girl content and do all the interactions that make the YouTube algorithm like me. I hear there's this new thing called hyping videos. I don't know. I also have a Patreon if you want to support me more directly, but of course, please don't feel obligated. I've been Mel, and thank you so much for letting me info dump at you.